Hello everyone, I'm Duke Skyloafer. We're going to do something a little bit different today, and I thought with the release of Space Engineers 2 going into Early Access Alpha, now might be a good time to talk about some of the essential mods that I use in all of my Space Engineers 1 playthroughs. If you don't know, I do have my own mod which I call Duke's Quality of Life, UI and Behavior, which I load into all of my games. I created this mod several years ago in 2020, and basically it's an empty mod and it has a whole bunch of dependencies. So when you put this mod in my game, it loads in all the dependencies automatically for me. So these are the things that I always pick for every world, no matter what I'm doing. So there are other essential mods like MES, the modular encounter systems, sometimes the defense shields, sometimes like weapon core. You know, there's a whole bunch of other mods out there, the water mod, that you could consider essential for certain types of gameplay. But to me, those are like scenario specific, right? So I'm not going to put those into every single world that I create. But these are the ones that I feel like I must have in every single world. So I don't think I've ever gone through them before, but they're present in every series that I've done. But if you just look at the mod list, you'll only see Duke's Quality of Life, UI, and Behavior. And if you don't click on that, then you're not going to know what that mod entails. So there is a link to it down in the description, but I'm going to go through each of the mods individually and just kind of talk through what they do briefly and maybe do a little demo. So let's see what we've got first. So the first mod that I'm going to talk about is called Advanced Welding, Detaching and Reattaching Blocks by Digi, the well-known Space Engineers modder. So what this does is it gives us a couple of different ways to attach and detach things. And right off the bat, I think this one is probably the biggest stretch to include in my mod list, in my mod essentials for behavior, because it really does kind of add additional blocks to the game. But I'm trying to use it to change the behavior of the welder and the grinder and such, but it does add this one block. So, you know, whatever, it's my mod list, I can do whatever I want. So what you do is, instead of using merge blocks, like putting a merge block here and putting a merge block here if I wanted to connect these two grids, which are completely separate grids. Instead of putting a merge block on each side and then having to grind down the merge blocks, I can put up a weld pad, which just takes one computer, 2 steel plates, and 3 construction components. And I can put one on each side, and when they get close to each other, they will destroy each other, but the grids will be merged together. So I'm going to demonstrate that just by taking this piston and reversing it, and you'll see as it gets closer on the screen, you'll start to see a readout of how close it is and if it is at the wrong angle and needs to roll a bit. And then when it gets, there it is, so it's showing the distance, whether it's correct angle, and now we are merged together. So you can see that the weld pads disappeared, and these are the same block now. So if I were to try to retract the piston, we will have issues with that. We can't retract it because the hinge is attached. Now, the other thing that we can do is, if we are looking at a block, see it says grid will split if removed, we can hold Control and activate detach mode. So instead of grinding the block normally, that's grinding normally, we will instead be grinding to detach. Hang on, detaching. There we go. So now this block is detached from every other block. So it's detached from here, but it is also, you can kind of see it, it is now detached from the block above it here. It's completely detached. It's a block sitting on top of another block. I can kind of demonstrate that better if I go back over here and increase my distance. And maybe increase my velocity a little bit here. There we go. So you can see it just kind of pushed it, just nudged it. So that's advanced welding. Allows you to easily detach things, easily reattach through welding. This can be useful, like if you want to save a battery, you can go up to the battery and start grinding to detach, for example, and then boom, that battery has detached and is no longer powering this grid, and I could use some other, like come over with a truck and pick it up and take it somewhere. So that's advanced welding. The next mod that I want to take a look at is called AQD, Computer Voice Lines. This is from the AQD series from Enenra, and Computer Voice Lines is very simple. It is just a replacement for all of the computer voice lines, meaning anytime your suit is talking to you, these are updated voice lines. So as a good example, let's say my suit is full and I go to pick something up.
Inventory full. Inventory full. Inventory full.
I think that's the one that you hear the most. The other one you might hear the second most is when you run out of hydrogen.
Fuel low. Fuel critical.
Yeah, so there you go. So that's our... So that's the voice lines. In addition... don't look over there. In addition to the HUD voice lines being replaced, there's also 151 new voice lines that are able to be played through the sound block. So we'll check out those real quick. They are mostly down here. They're named... You can't really see the names. This is the unfortunate part, but they're all these sound blocks, sound name. You can look them up on the thing, but I never end up using these because they're hard to see. But they sound like this.
Connection lost. Oxygen low. Deactivated. Shields critical.
So they can be useful if you could tell what they were. But since you can't really tell what they are, I never really use those. But these are all created. They're supposed to sound like Cortana. I think they were made with Cortana, like the Microsoft tool Cortana. So they all kind of sound like Cortana. So anyway, I mostly have it for the HUD sounds. Autofill Bottles by Ekthros, I hope I'm saying that correctly, is one of my favorite little mods that I always forget is there, but I'm really thankful when it is there. So basically what it does is, normally when you have a bottle like a hydrogen bottle, the only way to refill it is to put it into an oxygen generator, an O2, H2 generator. But with this mod installed, you can walk up to your survival kit, where is it, for example, and as you're refilling, you could see the hydrogen in my suit went to 100 and then went back down to 40 something, and if we look at the bottle, it's now 98%. If I keep filling, you'll see it go to 100 and then back down a little bit and then back up to 100, and if we look at the bottle, it's now 100%. So it basically, when your suit gets full, it pushes hydrogen or oxygen back into your bottle and then starts to refill the suit again. So this works for survival kits. It works for sitting in a cockpit that's wired up or conveyored up to an O2 generator, or any source like tanks, any source of hydrogen or oxygen. It can use it to refill your tanks. If your suit can refill, the tanks will refill. The next mod on my list is called Automatic Ore Pickup by Gwendolmere. So what this does is, when you go up to drill with the hand drill, instead of producing stone like this all the time, because that's how in vanilla it works, you bust the little pieces off with the drill, it automatically collects them as I'm drilling. And if I get full, then it'll start creating the little stone boulders, stones, whatever it is, on the ground. But as long as I have room in my inventory, it will just automatically collect them. And you can see down in the bottom right corner of the screen, it says ore collection ready. That's a nice little status thing. So if I switch to another tool, it'll say no drill, and then it'll say ready. And when I'm drilling, it'll say collecting, so it gives a little status. Now, I actually find that kind of annoying because I already know if my drill is in my hand, right? So luckily, there is a way to turn that off. I'm pretty sure this is really more of like a debug feature, but if you open up the text chat and then push F2, it'll bring up two different types of mod settings. And if you click on mod settings over here and then go to automatic ore collection and show on HUD off and then save, then it will turn off that indicator in the corner there. And then you can just go about your business like normal. All right, the next mod is called Better Spotlights, and then in brackets, Reduced Cone Haze by Thorn Blackwell. So what this mod does is a couple of different things, and there's a bunch of mods out there that do the same kind of thing, and I've landed on this one. It doesn't really matter which one you choose. They're all implemented basically the same way, but I've been using this one forever, so I like this one. As you can see where it's shining on this shadowy part of the hill, and if I kind of stand in front of it, you can see it's casting a shadow. For me, there's no lines. There's no lines being projected. So the vanilla spotlight projects these lines in the output. That's gone. So it's just a circle. It's just a nice bright circle. You can also tell that the cone, the foggy cone that's normally there, is barely visible. fact, I don't even know if it is visible at all in the daylight here, but it's barely visible at nighttime. You can barely see it. And then the last thing that it does is it extends the range of the spotlight out to up to 1,000 meters. And this, all of the spotlights in the game have been updated by this to various different degrees. So they've all had the lines removed, if that was a thing. They've all had the cone reduced, and they've all had the radius, the distance updated. So that's better spotlights. All right, the next mod is one of my favorite ones, and I think most people would agree that this is one of the essential mods that you always need to use when you're building in Space Engineers, and it's called Build Info by Digi. And what Build Info does, among many things, I'm only going to go through some of the features that it has, but if you bring up something and you're about to build it, you'll get this, and you can move this around where it is, so by pushing tab. So now it's over on the upper left, and I prefer to keep it over on the upper right. But it basically gives you all the information about the block that you're looking at. So it'll tell you the name, how many variants there are. So I don't have the block group in here, but if there were, let's see, if I go to the hinge, you can scroll through it and it'll say variant 1 of 2, variant 2 of 2, for the hinge part, scrolling through the block group. And then it'll tell you how much it weighs, what its bounding box size is, how long it takes to weld it, what its integrity is, meaning how much damage can it take before it explodes. You can see what the weight of the components are, or the volume of the components, all sorts of information about power, and then specific things. So like for this piston, it says there's the extended length, the maximum amount of force. For like cargo containers, it'll show you the maximum capacity of the interior. For like thrusters, it'll show you the maximum thrust that they can output. In this case, it also tells you, like this one says, it's from the DLC Contact because it's the square piston. For modded blocks, it'll tell you, let's see, if I bring up I think the only mod block I have in here is the weld pad. Let's bring up a weld pad. So now it'll say the mod is from Advanced Welding, Detaching, and Reattaching, etc., and gives you the Steam ID. So the other thing you could do is, let me go back to this one. If you hold Control and push plus, then it'll switch to different overlays. So this one is telling you the airtight sides. I believe the blue sides are airtight. And then it tells you, it kind of gives you an indication of the maximum extended length. If you push it again, you get the mount points. So you can mount on the bottom, you can mount on the sides, and you can only mount on 2 of the actual sides, which is interesting. I didn't know that. And if we hit it again, then we see where the ports are. There's one port on the back, and it also indicates where, that doesn't seem lined up correctly, but you can see where the control panels are as well. Now if you push it again, it goes away. One other thing that it can do, and this was originally a built-in feature that was taken out into a separate mod, and then it's now a dependency of Build Info. It's called Leak Finder. So you can pull Leak Finder in separately from Build Info if you wanted to. But have you ever been building an airtight room and you're trying to figure out why won't this thing pressurize, right? At the moment, it's because the door is open, but if I close the door, you'll see this will turn green, meaning it's an airtight space. But maybe you can't figure out why. You didn't realize you left the door open. Why can't I pressurize this room? If we click on this thing and set up Leak Finder, then it will start sending out these little particles that'll show you exactly where the leak is. And so it's really, really great way if you've got weird, glass panels that are connecting it weird ways and you're not quite sure where how they connect together. If you combine this with the overlay that I was showing that explains where the airtight sides are, then it's really easy to find. The leaks. And then as soon as the door closes, you could see no more leaks, and this turns green. Following that up, there's another mod that's very similar in both name and utility, in the sense that I think it is required for every Space Engineers playthrough, and I cannot adjust when I don't have it. It's called Build Vision by Dark Helmet, and I always confuse Build Vision and Build Info, and I always have to think for a second as to which one is which. But basically what you do is you can walk up to any functional block and hold Control and bring up this little menu. Now, by default, the menu was updated with version 3, and it's like a circular menu, and I don't really care for that. I found it to be less useful, but if you like it, then just, totally fine. You'd use whatever works for you. That is the default, but there's a setting you can change within the mod settings and tell it to go back to the original square list view. But if you hold down Control, then it will just show up, and then when you let go, it goes away. But if you push down on middle mouse button, then you've now kind of pinned that one. And then you can start to scroll through the things that are in it. You'll also see more when it is pinned like that. So you might, I'm looking for an example, but there we go. So like the spotlight, when you're just kind of looking at it, you get the peeking mode. And when you right mouse or middle mouse button, then you can get all of the options and you can scroll through all of them. Sometimes this even scrolls further, like there's multiple pages. But from here you can, turn it on and off. Let's see, we could go here and say, by middle mouse button clicking, we can turn it on and off. See? And we could, change the radius. It takes a long time. Let me push enter and then type in the radius that I really want, which is going to be like 70, right? And then I hit enter again, and it doesn't send that as a chat. It puts that in as the value itself. So very handy, very useful. It means you don't have to go and find a control panel. You can do things while you're looking at them, You don't have to be like, which landing gear is this one? And then you got to go and name them all. You could just look at that one, and on, off. Very fast, very easy. It really does make building way easier, and it's not entirely unrealistic, given that your character does have this nice little, control panel on his arm all the time. Maybe this is totally a function of that control panel or the helmet, the visor, which you can't actually see when it goes up and down, but from the first person view. But either way, build vision is absolutely essential in my opinion. This next mod is one that I think really should just be part of the base game, and as I've talked to people over the years, sometimes they're kind of surprised that it isn't part of the base game. When I was doing the Distant Stars series, where I was playing on Keen servers where things have to be 100% vanilla, it was, there were some people who were just like, yeah, just point the camera this way, point the camera that way. Can't do that. Cameras in Space Engineers always look forward. But with the mod camera panning, rotate camera view plus reset first person character view, also by Digi, you can actually rotate the camera inside of its little glass dome there. So if I get into this cockpit and view through the camera, you can see the controls up on the screen. Let me hop out and then hop back in. And you'll see hold Alt to pan the camera, Alt Shift to change rotation, and V to reset. So if I hold Alt and move the mouse, you get that nice little sound effect, that mechanical sound effect of it moving around, and I could pan in different directions. I can scroll the mouse wheel to zoom in and out, and you could zoom pretty far. You can zoom pretty far. And then Shift Alt will let you rotate the camera a little bit, and then I can hold Alt and still move along here. So if I, it's still a very natural movement, even though it's rotated. Like I'm moving the mouse up to go up, even though it's sideways and everything. And then if I push V, then it resets back to normal. So if I'm looking over here, I'm all zoomed in, and I push V, then I'm back to start. If I go over here, back to start. It doesn't reset the zoom, it only resets the panning. But it resets to basically where that reticle is looking. Cool, so that's camera panning. This next mod is very easy to showcase. It's called Colorful Icons by Type KCZ. I hope I'm saying that right. And all it is you can see it down in the toolbar there. And if I bring up the picker here, everything is in color. All the blocks are in color. Normal Space Engineers icons are black and white, and really black and white with like a blue tinge a little bit, but all the blocks here have been colorized. And they're the same icons, and the color has been added to them. Which is very impressive, to be honest. Like, they're not like new photos taken in color. They are just colorized versions of the icons. It's very, very, very impressive. It's a little thing, but I have never liked the monotone look of the interface. I think it's just kind of blah. So I've really enjoyed having the colorful icons, and whenever a new update comes out, it takes a little bit for them to update to add the colors to the icons for any new blocks, but they do. They have been doing it. The last update was October 20th, 2024, as of right now, which I think was right around when the Contact update came out. So everything has been updated. You can see colorful icons on the automaton blocks and everything. So yeah, colorful icons. Can't live without it. Do you hate those little edges, those little pieces of steel beam that show up between some of the blocks? Because I do. And that's why I use a mod called Edge Be Gone, No Armor Edges by Whiplash 141. And what it does is just make the armor nice and smooth and get rid of those little edges. Gets rid of those little divisions, the divisions that show up in between when you have two different colors, or between certain blocks where the pattern doesn't quite line up correctly. They've always put those little edges in. And this mod completely removes those edges. All right, this mod, called Force Dynamic Grids by Nevkariel, is one that I'm not sure that I even need. There's actually a whole category of mods in here that I'm not sure that I actually need them, but they are there because they solve a potential bug that may or may not crop up while you're playing Space Engineers. And what this does is, every so often when you have a static grid, like one that's stuck in a planet or an asteroid, and something happens to it, it separates, sometimes there's a little bug where the separated part remains as a static grid, even if you have unsupported grids turned off in the settings. And so then you end up with a floating static grid. So all this does is just make sure that when your grid separates, it eventually turns into a dynamic grid and falls down or floats away or whatever. So after I grinded it, you could see that there was a little pause and then it fell. That may have been the mod kicking in, probably not. But that's what it does. It makes sure that it eventually becomes a dynamic grid and falls down. And along those lines of mods that are solving bugs that you may or may never experience, I'm using another mod by Meridius9/Lucas called Hollow Planet Cleanup. So if you're not familiar with how voxels work in Space Engineers, let me get the thing looking good here. When you go below a voxel surface, like a planet or an asteroid, there's nothing underneath. The voxels are not, the planets are not solid in the sense of how the game calculates where they are, right? So when the game is calculating whether or not you're going to impact something, it's just checking whether or not you are impacting with the surface. Are you intercepting the surface of the planetary body? If you have completely bypassed the surface, like if you're using a speed mod and within a single tick of the game, you completely transition from the outside to the inside, you are now here, and there is nothing down here for you to collide with. You will just continue falling toward the center of the planet. And what this does, what Hollow Planet Cleanup does, is it periodically looks for things that are completely inside of voxel-based entities and then just deletes them. So, maybe your spaceship crashed into the surface of something and a piece of it broke off and was completely clipped through and just fell in. This just makes it so that you don't end up with random stuff, taking up resources for the game and floating around in the center of the planet, because the game has to calculate physics for it, because it's probably bouncing around the gravity core and everything. So we just delete those. Again, I have no idea how often in modern Space Engineers this becomes an issue, but, who knows? If it happens, then it's not an issue. And if it doesn't happen, it's also not an issue. So, Hollow Planet Cleanup. So this next mod is one that I've come to rely on since this game doesn't have, like, a mini-map. And it does have GPSs, but sometimes you forget to place a GPS. The mod is called HUD Compass. Now, the original mod is by Zelius, but the version that I'm using is called HUD Compass Fixed Directions by Spark. And this is basically, they've taken the HUD Compass mod and they've corrected it. So just based on the proper north and south pole of the individual planets, based on whatever, they've actually corrected the directions. They were facing the wrong direction. They were reversed, I believe, with the original mod. So as you can see at the top of the screen, you have, west, west, northwest, northwest, north, northwest, etc. And you go around. There's a couple of different options you can use with this mod. So for example, if you type compass, use deg true, then it'll switch to degrees instead of cardinal directions. Compass directions. You could see this is I don't remember if I assume this is probably south, right? 0 degrees, and then 180 is going to be north. You know, so if that's the way you like to think about it, if you want to tell people, you know, like head to 75 degrees, you know, whatever, you could do that. That if you want to turn it off, I'm going to set it back to false, get back my directions here. Other things you could do are show a clock. Now, this is not showing right now because I'm in, I've stopped the sun from moving, but when the sun is active and you're in creative or in survival, then you will see a clock, which will show you the local time. You can see this in all of my streams. You can see the local time, and then you can see like a universal time. So if you're not near a planet, the universal time is the only one that shows. And I don't know what that's based on, but when you're on the planet, the local time is literally based on the time that the sun rises and the time that the sun sets in the place that you're standing, which is very cool because if you are on, you know, these planets are very small, and especially if you go to one like, you know, Europa, you can actually drive fast enough against the sun such that the clock rolls backwards, you know, because you're kind of going through, it's like a consistent, a constant variable time zone, you know, CVTZ or whatever. Anyway, compass mod, very handy. All right, the next mod that I want to show is a HUD mod. So you've seen it the entire time I've been playing. It's just called HUD, Modern and Fancy Color. So this this HUD mod has come out a couple of times. It came out in black and white at first, and then it went to color, and there have been other variations of it. But this is the one that I use. It's by Adriano, and it's the thing that puts all of my stats on the bottom left side and puts them in circles like that, and it adds color to it, and it rearranges the HUD in the way that I've come to enjoy most. You know, no matter what the HUD looks like, it always is fine. There's not a whole lot of stats to look at, so no matter what, I can always tell what's up, but I really do like this layout the most because it just seems like it has a nice bit of whimsy that some of the other HUD mods don't have. I believe this one is also available as a plugin. If you're using the plugin loader and you're playing on like dedicated servers, you can load this HUD mod as a plugin so that the server doesn't have to load it for you and provide it to everybody. Have you ever used the newer Sci Fi Button control panel? And, you know, you have all these options for showing different things. Each one of these is a different screen, but you're not quite sure what to put there. Like, half the time I just end up putting words on there. But with the mod that's just called Sci Fi Button Images by NetherSpark, you have a collection of images that you could choose from. So I'm going to choose numpad 4 because it's this one here. I'm going to say that the content is text and images. Scroll down to the images, and then all of these new ones here, here we go, the button ones. All these new ones that say button are different icons that you can put that are perfectly sized to fit within these. So like if I wanted to have a button that I'm looking for, like for an elevator, right? There we go. So I can call my elevator. If I'm building an elevator, I could do that. Or let's say that I want to go to numpad 3 and I want to turn my drills on and off. Let's see, here we go. Text and images, button for drill. All right, so now this button will turn my drills on and off. And there's a whole bunch of them in there for a whole bunch of different situations. It doesn't cover every single situation, but it's covered pretty much all of the ones that I've needed in the past. I think the only thing they could probably add to it is more states for like when a drill is on versus off. Because we could, if Space Engineers had a better way to shift the buttons, but I could have like a on drill versus off drill button, you know? And I think there are some for some of these where they show different states. Let's take a quick look, because I think there is like, here we've got cycle, green, here we go, like battery icons, battery discharge, you know, battery, recharge, battery, discharge. I think there are more that do this. Power, just general power on, power off. Yeah, it might be a shields up, shields down, you know, if you have that. It does also have arrows. Here we go. Arrows in 8 different directions, plus rotation and reverse. And these will allow you to, if you have a control panel that is, you know, moving something, like I want my pistons to go out, and then I want them to go up, and then I want them to come back down. You could just have a bunch of arrows here. I find that to be a much nicer aesthetic than just putting the words on there like I often do when I'm lazy. All right, the next mod is called the Sleep mod by Zelius. And this used to be part of the compass mod. It actually used to be incorporated into it such that when you slept in a bed or in a cryopod, if it was after 6 p.m. local time, then you would go to sleep. And the sun would spin around to the next morning, and then it would be morning again, and all of the weather effects would go away. So I'm going to actually just show, instead of showing it here, I'm going to show the some footage from one of my streams where I just get into a bed and have the cycle go around. And I'm also using a different mod that's not included here, which locks the skybox to the sun so that it looks like the planet you're on is actually spinning and not just the sun. But that's not included in my mod collection. But yeah, that's the sleep mod. Another mod that could be pretty important to you if you're a YouTuber or a streamer or whatever is this popular mod called Sneaky Sounds Quieter Tools by Splitsy, the ever popular Splitsy. Which I believe he developed this specifically because the tools were too loud in his videos. So these tool sounds are much quieter than they are in vanilla, significantly quieter. If you play with this mod a lot, you know, you start to think like even these are too loud. But then you play in vanilla and it is ridiculous how loud they are. When I was doing Distant Stars, my series on Keen server where there were no mods, I had to use a plugin to add this mod in because it was ridiculous how loud the tools are. It's probably one of my biggest requests for Space Engineers 2 is make the tool sounds configurable. Give me a slider in the thing for tool sounds specifically, or just make them reasonably quiet. Like I get that a drill like that looks like this is going to be, you know, that's going to be really loud in real life, but I'm not in real life. I'm in a video game. So make them reasonably loud. All right, so there's another mod called RelativeSpectator by Climb, which is basically used to help lock onto grids. So let me slow my camera down here. You can see how it can be kind of, if you're following a grid, you got to kind of keep up with it, keep adjusting. You can change the speed of your spectator cam. But if you're looking at a grid and press T, then you lock to that grid. And now you're just following that grid everywhere that it's going. All right, and you don't have to worry. You can move your spectator camera and it will just move along with that grid. And then if you press T again while looking away, then it moves away. Now, another thing that I recently learned is that I may not need this mod because if I use the numpad multiplication and look at a grid, then I get the same thing. And it's a little bit more... like, I don't like it as much. It's a little bit harder to control, but it works. It works if I could still do this. So I might end up taking this mod out. I didn't know that this was a thing. Also, is this ship going to crash into the mountain here? It's a really great question. The last mod that I want to show is called Hostile Takeover by Thraxis. This mod was released to kind of replace an older mod by Meridius 9, which is for taking over grids. Now, it'll remain to be seen if we still need this in the future. You know, Keen is building in some things for taking over grids, but I'm going to explain how this one works, because for the moment, I like the mechanics of this one. So, the first thing that it does is, when you take your grinder out, it starts to highlight specific blocks, and it will do these in certain categories first. So the first things you'll find are control blocks highlighted. These are the ones you need to get first. And now they've gone away. Have I moved too far away? There they are. You only see them briefly, it seems. There they go. So that's all the control seats and everything. So if I get over there, if I can get in there, let's see, can we get in through here? All right, so once you make it into this room, you can see there's all these control stations marked in blue. So what you need to do for each of these is grind them all down to the hack point. And once they are down to the hack and you've welded them back up, then you've taken control of that particular seat. Then, including the remote control, once you've taken control of all of these things, then you have to move on to the medical blocks. So if there's a med kit, or a med bay rather, or a survival kit, you will have to take control of all of those as well. Then after that, if there are any weapons, you're going to have to grind those down as well. Now, I don't think you have to necessarily weld them all back up, but you do have to at least grind them down to be non-functional. And you may not want to weld up all the weapons right away because it may start shooting itself. But, you know, you have to get all the weapons, and then any trap blocks, meaning warheads, I believe is the only thing in that category. And then everything else, the mod doesn't care about. So once you've taken over all of those things, you've either destroyed them, grinded them down, or hacked them, grinded them down to the hack line, and then welded them back up and taken control, then the mod will give you control of the entire grid. So that way you don't have to go through the game, or I'm sorry, go through the grid and get every single door, every single vent, you know, every single different thing. You just mainly have to take control of the control stations, because that's the thing that every ship has, is going to have control stations or a remote control or something. Sometimes they have survival kits. Usually if you're going after NPC ships, they're not going to have survival kits on them, so you don't have to worry about that. And the weapons, you're going to have to take care of no matter what. So I find that this is a much more immersive way of taking control of the ship. It's kind of like anything that controls the ship needs to be under your control, and anything that defends the ship needs to be under your control, and that's pretty much it. So I really like this. It makes it take a little bit longer to take over a ship, and sometimes you have to be really strategic about it too, to decide how you're going to get through, because you might have to destroy parts of the ship as you grind through, as I ground my way in here, you know. So that's it, folks. That is all of the mods that are in Duke Skyloafer's quality of life, UI, and behavior. The mod that I use all the time, that brings all of these different mods together into my world. Feel free to use this however you like. If you'd like to use it in your worlds, feel free. I don't change it very often. I have, over the past 4 years, swapped out mods here and there as newer mods have replaced older ones. As mods have stopped working, I've taken them out, or if they've become janky with updates, I've taken them out. You know, a lot of these things in here, they're either background changes where you don't even realize consciously that they're there, or they are features that are just there in the background and you use them when you need them, and when you don't need them, they're gone. Now, there are some other things that are in your face all the time, like the compass and the HUD mod and everything. And that's my personal choice. This is my personal mod. So you could use this either as a collection that is already put together for you, or you could use it as a guide of things. Pick and choose however you want. So thank you very much, everybody. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and don't forget to check out my streams on various days of the week. Usually Space Engineers is on Thursdays at the moment. Thanks for watching, and I'm going to jump off this cliff. Here we go. That was a bad idea. Maybe not. All right, bye, everybody.